welcome to episode 3 of the Shining the Light On podcast, Sugar and Control. How are you today, Therese?
I'm doing good. It's a beautiful day here, and I'm excited to talk about this topic. I mean, I know that we're just going to be able to scratch the surface today because this is a big one, specifically the sugar part. The control part, I think, is going to be interesting to find out, to what degree that's going on.
I agree. So welcome to everyone. We are so excited to dive into this today. Like Therese said, we're going to just scratch the surface, but what we wanted to start with this, and one of the reasons we picked this as the topic for this week is really because we've both had such like deep connected relationships with sugar, haven't we?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think it ran my life for a while, for sure.
And the thing with it is you don't realize it's running your life until you start like healing it and looking at it and looking at how bad you crave it and how easy it is to give into it. When you're in it, you just think it's normal to crave sugar. Oh, sugar isn't everything, whatever. It's not a big deal. And then you start to look at how sugar actually impacts you physically, emotionally, energetically, and spiritually. And there's so many connections.
Yeah. I was thinking we could kind of share about maybe one of your memories around sugar where it was kind of a low point for you, because I have one that comes up for me. So I'd love to hear, do you want me to go first? I could
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about like, when did I become aware, looking back, that it was really bad? And I think back to around, it was like 2007, 2008, right in there. I was living in Brooklyn with my husband, and down the street from us. So in New York, the blocks are long and there's almost always a convenience store at every block. So right at the end of our street was a little bodega. And pretty much every night at 11 p.m. on the dot, I would get this urge for a cherry flavored Coke Zero and a Reese's peanut butter cup. Like I just like suddenly like needed it. And I remember I would, sweet talk my husband into doing it, like, please, 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 will you go get it? And he's like, this is going to make you happy. I'm like, that'll make me happy. Sending him out at 11 p.m. at night to go get this crap, like a bunch of caffeine and a bunch of like high fructose corn syrup, just crap. And needing to have that before bed. And it was like a bell would go off in my body where, at 9 o'clock, if you'd asked me if I would do it tonight, I probably wasn't even thinking about it. And I can just remember looking back on that and being like, oh my God, on so many levels, that was incredibly unhealthy. And yet remembering it was like a flipwood switch in my brain, and I had to have those things. So that's kind of my darkest moment when I think about it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think for me, it was my garbage can moment when I was just so deep in my food addiction, and binge eating was like, I'd start eating sugar and I would completely lose control until I was so full that I was sick and just literally felt like my whole stomach was going to explode. I didn't know how to manage like portions with it. And there's a reason for that. And we'll get into that. But I just remember, I had a big package of Oreo cookies that I was working my way through amongst other things that I had finished. And I'd always said, well, if I put the food in the garbage, I won't go and dig through the garbage. But for me, my food addiction and sugar addiction got so severe that I got a bit of room and I'm laying on the couch, like crying in pain. And I'm like, well, I might as well go eat the cookies, because if I'm going to try to eat better tomorrow, like I better get this out of the house, and this is it. And so I went and dug through the garbage and ate the cookies. And it just, you're like, holy moly, this really does have a huge amount of control and power over me. Like if I'm digging through a garbage can, like this is intense and severe and it's embarrassing. And why is this happening? And so I think that many people can relate to both of our circumstances, and whether it's more minimal or it's more severe, but sugar is a very addictive substance, and it's put in everything, and it's just marketed, right? Like, faces everywhere, and it's at every convenience store. I remember going to, I don't know if you guys have the chain restaurant Moxie's down in the States. I feel like it comes from the States, but it's whatever. They serve like chicken and pizza and steak and, all the usual stuff, burgers. And I remember going there one day, I'll tell this quick story. And I was trying to cut out sugar or limit my refined sugar intake to help overcome my food addiction, because for me personally, I just felt like I can't do a bit. If I do a bit, like I'm losing control. So that's the personal decision I make. I don't make my clients do that necessarily unless your addiction's severe, just as a side note. But I went to Moxie's and I ordered like this pineapple chicken veggie rice dish, like trying to pick something healthier. And I'm like, what's like, do they put sugar in this? Like, because I was just curious to ask. And they're like, yeah, they put sugar in the vegetables. They put sugar in like, because people's taste buds are so numbed. And obviously we know the agenda further behind that, which is like the addiction piece, keep people addicted. So let's put sugar in the vegetables. And it blew my mind. And that's the last time I went to a Moxie's, but that's even that, isn't that shocking?
It is shocking. I mean, it's pretty low. And yet I was, as you were talking, and thank you for what you shared, because even though I didn't have that moment, I had those thoughts, exact same thoughts.
Right?
Like my justification was, I have to get this out of the house and not like take it out to a dumpster somewhere. It was like, I was the dumpster. I had to take it in.
Yeah.
You know, there was like, I couldn't reason just getting away from it. I had to take it in to get away from it. And of course, that just traps you in a cycle.
Yes.
But what I wanted to share with you is like our generations, I don't know if we really stood a chance with this sugar thing, because I found out in 1977 is when they implemented the low fat phase.
Right.
And you know all about this. So I'll let you explain that to people, why we didn't really stand a good chance fighting off sugar when they introduced the low fat phase.
Yeah. So as we know, a lot of us, got this heavy marketing push that fat is bad. So we're going to strip all of the fat out of food, and then it doesn't taste as good. So now we have to amplify the taste and load it full of sugar. Right. And so then you have all these low calorie, low fat diet kind of foods that are coming out. They're just loaded with sugar, empty calories are not going to satiate you. And so this, to me, amplified sugar addiction and sugar cravings and blood sugar issues so much, because none of this food is satiating you.
Right. And they're putting sugar in everything. Everything tasted like, SHIT. It was gross.
Yes.
And so in order to make it palatable to people, they're upping this sugar content. I mean, I can think of like the cereals I was eating as a kid, like Frosted Flakes was literally just a bowl of sugar.
Yeah.
Like there's just no other ingredient really that's there. But here's some other things I wanted to share with you that I learned about sugar. So I was listening to a lecture by Dr. Robert Lustig, and he is a professor of pediatric endocrinology at the University of California. And this is what is crazy, is that sugar's often what defended as being an energy source. Like our body needs sugar for energy. And what he has discovered is that it's actually eating up the things that our mitochondrial creates. Our mitochondrial is that center of our cells, and it's in all of our cells, right? Our mitochondria. So basically sugar poisons the mitochondria and shuts down what it produces, meaning we're actually not getting energy from it. It's robbing us of energy. And here's the really scary part, is that sugar works exactly the same as cyanide, which is a poison that will kill you, because cyanide also shuts down the mitochondria. It's just cyanide does it instantly and quickly, where sugar does it a little bit at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. Shocking, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why they put it in everything, because it's the little accumulation over time. And a few facts that I learned about sugar, that really blew my mind and helped me understand, wow, no wonder I'm so addicted to it. No wonder I can't just eat small amounts. Number one, sugar is 10 times more addictive than cocaine. And they've done so many studies where they actually put mice in two different cages, and they put one with water and then one with sugar water. And the one with sugar water, they finish the sugar water and then they start eating each other, because that's how addicted they are to the sugar. It's right. So talk about the behavior of like desperation and addiction. And what that is when you eat sugar, even when you start thinking about sugar, we have a part of the brain called the hippocampus that stores pleasure memories. So every time you associate eating sugar with pleasure and having that dopamine high, you store that memory in the hippocampus. And so then when you're sad or you're down, or you think about a certain food or holiday or special occasion, and you think about eating certain things, that hippocampus is lighting up, and you're already starting to anticipate the dopamine high, which is really a reward. And then you
Yeah.
buy the food, or you make the food, or you grab the food and you're salivating and you start to have the dopamine hit and you take the first few bites. And you know, Therese, what this is all about, and listeners, like, you get that high and I'm like, this is so good. Oh my God, everything, nothing matters in this moment. I'm so happy, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You know, I've watched a couple of episodes of those TLC shows. TLC is so bad. It's just trash, but they're often shows like My 600-Pound Life. And one of the things that you see happening with these people who are in, severe states of obesity is their reaction to food. And you watch them and you can see the dopamine fireworks going off in their brain as they're eating this. And speaking about dopamine, one of the things I learned about is that, our dopamine receptors help us to remember food is good, right? It helps us to remember eating is good. It starts as a baby, right? So that we remember to feed ourselves and eat. It's a positive correlation that the brain creates. With sugar and the way that it, the dopamine hit we get with it, right? It's such a strong, pleasurable sensation that we get that a little bit of sugar would send off that initial signal, right? Be like, this is good. Remember this, like do this again. But if we're over consuming sugar, which is really easy to do because again, you're already in pleasure, what happens is the brain actually starts to create more dopamine receptors, like almost on the spot as you're enjoying that food or maybe over enjoying that food. More dopamine receptors get picked up, which means I need more. Right? The first hit isn't enough. Suddenly you need more hits. And I was saying to Amber that when I had my birthday recently, I got a nice, yummy, sugary cupcake for dessert. And I enjoyed that cupcake. I was eating it. It was good. But the next morning I was like craving donuts. Like I had a donut fixation. And now I understand like what was going on there because there was a lot of sugar. I mean, it was a salted caramel gooey, it was just sugar.
Right.
But it was interesting because it was like that sensation, like the ghost of what I'd been through in the past was like, I'm awake again. Now I remember this is kind of our jam. This is what we like to do. And all the way to the point where I drove to a coffee shop to get donuts. And then at the last minute, I pulled the trigger. I got the donuts, but I gave them to my kids. I gave them like each donut and I got myself a decaf coffee and drove away. And I'm like, okay, I did it. I got the donut. And it was weird because I was like, I felt really pulled to it. And that sensation lasted for several days.
Yeah. And to go into a little bit of the why, because you might be watching this and really relating, and thank you for sharing that experience. When we, like you said, we multiply these dopamine receptors. So the next time you eat sugar, you want more, you crave more, you almost want to have a bigger quantity to get the same high or a bigger high because we're seeking that bigger dopamine hit. And that's why with emotional eating, binges, food addiction, why it can seem to escalate and grow and get out of control because you need to consume more. And same with the refined salts, the MSG, the aspartame, to get that same high. Otherwise it gets dulled and your taste buds get numbed and you need to eat more sugar to even have your taste buds be amplified. And that's why when you start like reducing the processed food and increasing your natural food intake, why your taste buds wake back up and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so sweet now. And like a banana is really sweet and like fruit's really sweet, but it's satisfying. And when you do have that cupcake, you're like, wow, ooh, I can really feel that now. It's different. You get it out of your system. Right. And so there's that, like, and also when we eat, especially if you're not per se, like just having the cupcake, it can do this with that too. But when you overeat, your body goes, oh, like, is there a famine coming? We better increase your appetite level up to 45% for the next day. And that makes it so much easier to want to crave those foods too and overeat them because your body thinks that, well, maybe you just, ate a bunch and now you're not going to find another deer to hunt for another week, right? It's that caveman blueprint that we also don't know how to operate. And these food companies purposefully, they know all of this and they designed this to make it really hard for us to navigate, but they know how to make people addicted to food. And adding a lot of sugar makes it really easy.
Right. I remember watching a few years ago that sugar documentary that came out, and they were talking about how fast food companies had literally tested to find the perfect amount of sugar, and they would, try over adding sugar and people would reject it. If there wasn't enough sugar, people could reject it. But if they hit this very specific amount and we're talking like in hamburgers, we're not just talking like shakes. We're talking like foods you wouldn't suspect sugar being in. They're injecting this perfect amount of sugar that lights up the brain in just the right amount that you will store it as that I need this again memory and crave it.
Exactly. And there's literally labs and companies that's what they're paid to do. And that's shocking. And I can't wait to see all of them go out of business, because that's just not cool. But there's sugar hidden in so many things that you would never imagine. And look at all the healthy foods that are or the quote unquote foods that are marketed as healthy, like fruit flavored yogurts and cereals and granola bars, like all of these things that are like got the green check mark that are just so full of sugar. So full of sugar.
Yeah. Gosh, I was watching a video that someone had done about specifically hot Cheetos. I'll have to like share that with you and we'll have to talk about it another time. But it was literally hot Cheetos were causing people to go to the hospital. And it was because something about the sugar level and the spice together would cause people to over consume it. It was like they couldn't stop. It was like a conveyor belt just going into their mouth, to the point where they're going through bags of Cheetos in a sitting and ending up in the ER because it's messing with their internal organs really badly.
That doesn't surprise me, because they've designed these foods to make it easy for people to lose control because of the dopamine high, the increased appetite level, the way it messes with your blood sugar. Right. There's so many things that we're not taught that make addiction to food and emotional eating, binge eating, cravings really easy. And so now you think about, well, holy crap, like, have you ever gone through something like this, anything we're talking about, and then you try to wean off of sugar? Because I vividly remember starting to learn about sugar like 14 years ago, and that it's 10 times more addictive than cocaine, and how it's impacting my gut, feeds the unhealthy gut bacteria, and that can make you crave sugar. There's just so many things. Right. And starting to wean off of sugar, and then going into such a low mood and feeling like my mood's in the gutter, my cravings are so through the roof. I'm so irritable. I'm tired. I have brain fog, like going through a drug like withdrawal, right? Because it's really not much different than a drug, other than it eats away at you a lot more slowly. And drugs and alcohol can, really be fatal quickly. Right. But just going through that. And like you said, like it took you a few days to get it out of your system.
Yeah, I recently learned it can take up to 3 days for the sugars to leave your system, to the point where you will find, if you don't introduce any more, you'll get over cravings in 3 days. But that means 3 days of going through withdrawal-like symptoms, where you will find yourself suddenly driving to, a coffee shop to get a donut. You're like, what am I doing here? Like, it's that hard. And what's really interesting is, I've been working with Amber for years. And so she's really helped me. One of the ways that you helped me so much was with teaching me how to replace things, because my old way of trying to deal with it, trying to overcome it, was to white knuckle it, or to go, cold turkey. I'm not going to eat anything sweet. I never lasted 24 hours doing that. I have a breakdown, start crying, and, beg for sugar basically, or go get it. And so it wasn't until I found alternatives that were giving me, the sweeter flavor. Like I was using stevia before. Stevia is hard for some people. Some people can drink it or use it and they don't taste it. Some people can really taste like an aftertaste. It was the monk fruit. When you turned me onto that, I was like, oh my God, this is so much easier. That was so much easier. But yeah, I can't, I suddenly lost my train of thought, which actually works with what we're talking. The swapping helped. That was the thing. Like now I know. So, having gone through that situation, I found myself at the store, but I swapped at the last second. I got myself, the decaf coffee, and that was like, okay, now I've got something in my mouth and it's not this donut, which I was so close in partaking in. But if I hadn't had that, I'd be in the loop still. I would totally be in. And it's so interesting because it's like, you think you're overcoming parts of yourself. Like, I've overcome this part, it's not coming back. And the sugar, it's like resurrecting something that you didn't know was still active in there. You know, it makes me think of what you're talking about with the hippocampus. I'm sure what it did, it was just trigger those memories that are still stored in there of like, this gives me pleasure.
Yeah. And what's interesting about what you were talking about earlier with where at 11 p.m. you'd want that cherry pop and you'd want the Reese's peanut butter cup. So when we repeat a pattern the same time every night, so 11 p.m. hits, there's literally a pathway in your brain lighting up and going, Therese, it's time for you to eat and drink this, because you keep repeating the pattern and the brain can't tell a disempowering habit from a good habit. And so this is why so many people struggle with like eating and watching TV or associating certain foods with certain times or times of the year. And maybe you find you can like manage it, and then Thanksgiving comes or Christmas comes and you're like, I just want to eat all the sugar. Yeah, the pumpkin spice stuff.
Lattes. Yes. Like everyone goes nuts for pumpkin spice lattes.
Yes. And part of that is the certain holidays or celebrations or locations, memories, people that you associate eating certain foods with. You literally wire these memories and patterns in your brain. And when you're like, okay, like I think I'm free of this, and then it hits you hard, there could be those pathways to still dismantle. So yeah, to your point, like that's a part of this that we're not taught either.
So we're actually kind of verging on the second part of this, which is control. And we wanted to talk about or touch on, because I don't think we know yet how it was used for control, but my spidey senses say that it was used as a form of mind control. And one of the things I learned about it is that the effects of sugar on the body mimic what they have determined ADD is, right? So the inability to focus, the inability to sit still, the inability to listen. When we're in a sugar high, our ability to focus on something goes away. It's like we're the most distracted we could possibly be. And really the only thoughts that we can seem to concentrate on is, how do I get more sugar? You know, what do I need to do to get more sugar?
Yeah. Totally. And yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because again, there's that dopamine high, the blood sugar spikes and drops, then our cravings increase. We're not satiated from what we did have. So the ghrelin, which makes us hungry, keeps being produced, and then we're not satiated. And then what I find with a lot of people and myself, like even Friday we went and we had birthday cake and ice cream and things, right? And I enjoyed, and then I'm like, wow, afterward, I feel jittery. Wow, the next day I feel brain fog, my mood's in the gutter, I'm tired, I can feel my vibration drop, I don't feel my channel, to source as open. So we start to notice the energetic and the spiritual connections to sugar, as well as the physical and emotional impacts. When you start to become more attuned to your body and you heal and you become more energetically sensitive, you really start to notice the difference. And I enjoyed it with love Friday. Like there was no part of me that felt guilty or anything negative. And so you think, oh, maybe this time, like I'm going to eat this and I'm going to feel fine tomorrow. And my body's like, bleh, no, like here's the impacts, right? Like it happened. And so we know that sugar impacts our vibration. It drops our vibration. It calcifies the pineal gland. And that, blocks you from being able to discern and you use your intuition. And that it dumbs people down when we're consuming all this. And I don't mean it that anyone's dumb, but it is when you have brain fog and you're tired and all you can think about is sugar. It's really hard to be present and focus and go about your day in a high energy and take care of yourself, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it makes it hard to make critical decisions when you're in that state. You can't. And one of the things that's interesting is we live in a time of short attention spans. I mean, now we're an instant gratification society where short form video is the highest ranking social media that's out there. And notice that sugar reduces our focus. And now we've got 7-second videos that are, this is a combination that's like made in hell, really, because it's just, again, reinforcing the dopamine hits. And there's been studies done on porn on the mind, right? And I think there's a connection here. I know it sounds like I'm going off track, but I think there's a connection because what the studies they've done with porn, which are really scary, is that after a while, what you're looking at cannot satiate you. in the way that it was initially. It's like you're literally breaking down some of the frontal cortex of the brain. It's actually causing it, and all the way to the point of like erectile dysfunction in men. If they consume large amounts of porn, they end up with erectile dysfunction. So the body starts breaking down from too much dopamine being flooded into the system. And then we look at the combination of something more accessible and more people use, which is social media. And then even more accessible is sugar, which is in everything. In fact, you actually have to work harder these days to avoid eating sugar, right? That you actually have to be more mindful when you shop, because anything you're eating that's in a box, you can pretty much guarantee that sugar is a part of it.
Totally. That's the thing, is in the beginning, it does feel more daunting to start weaning off of sugar and bringing in more alternatives. But once you learn about it and you try them and you see how easy it is to use them and how many new products are coming out that are naturally sweetened, or that you can make certain things yourself and you get your favorite recipes, it does get easier. But it is, anything in the beginning is daunting because you're trying something new. And as you start to get to know these layers of sugar addiction and sugar cravings, you know, you learn so much about it, and then you can take your power back. But if you don't know anything, you just feel like so like hopeless to it. Like, how am I ever going to not be able to give into it? So this is why it's important for us to dissect this and help you understand that there is a depth here, and it's not because there's something wrong with you and because you don't have willpower. That's so exactly beyond that.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because that was one of the things that I used to beat myself up about when I couldn't overcome it, was like, what happened to me? I thought I could do this. I don't have any willpower. And then unfortunately, when you talk to yourself like that, you're helping manifest it in your own system. You're weakening yourself from within by holding these thoughts about your inability to overcome something. You just make it that much harder. But yeah, I mean, I remember when there is a point when you're trying to make changes for the better, that you realize that there's a lot in what you're doing you're going to have to approach differently. Amber's really helped me a lot with the food portion part, because I used to be the person who would like shop at Whole Foods, but I'm still buying the frozen boxed stuff because, you know, that was just more convenient. That's what I was used to. That's how I was approaching it and how I was moving forward. So there is, there is always a little bit of a mountain to climb. It's not a big mountain, but it's more of a mental mountain of like, can I change my own behavior? To move forward in a way that's more supportive of me. I have to say, when you start doing it, when you start making that switch, it suddenly at some point becomes easier. You're like, why was I fighting this so hard? This is actually much easier than I thought. But also there is this, I don't know if it's the word accomplishment is right. It feels like an accomplishment. Like I feel like some part of me really like claimed back my control or my power in the situation. And I suddenly felt like more empowered. Things became easier. It's like when I see something like, let's say donuts, because I don't know, donuts are doing it for me lately, but when I see donuts, I'm like, I can make something that would satisfy. I have a recipe for it now. It's like I could make it myself, and I could make it in a way where I could enjoy this without it torturing me and causing me to mentally obsess over something that ultimately isn't that important in my life, but it feels important because my mind is fixating on it.
Yeah. And you're right. The momentum builds, because not only do you start to gain confidence and like, wow, like I'm learning how to have more balance with food and I'm not losing control. It's like, wow, my inflammation's reducing. I don't have as much pain. My clothes are fitting better. My mental clarity is improving. My energy is improving. My digestion is better. I'm not as gassy. My hormones are getting, like, you physically start to feel so much better, right? And your body heals. Mentally, you feel so much better. You feel the vibration go up. You feel your intuitive gifts expanding, and you're like, wow, like I just feel so bright and alive. And
to add to that, I feel like I'm taking my power back. We're talking about how sugar is controlling us and getting us to behave in a way that even we are like flabbergasted that why am I doing this right now? Like, I don't want to, but here I am again. And when you really start to handle food differently, or you change your relationship to food, and you change how you're, eating by, like, even if you're like going from more packaged or prepared food to making it yourself, there
Mhm.
is you taking your power back, and you realize you can play this game, big bad guys out there, all you want, like big companies that want
Yeah.
to, have a monopoly over us, and you're not winning, because I've just claimed my power back, and I've
Yeah.
just now set it up where I'm in a scenario where I feel much safer and much more in control of what goes into my body.
Yes, exactly. And they're not winning anymore. We're taking our power back and we're healing, and they lose. And I think it's really important that we vote with our dollars. So
So
it's a deep thing. So why don't we dive into some cards?
yes,
And again, this is why we wanted to share some of our stories. You're so not alone, and we want to let you know that, and that, the healing is available. So
absolutely.
why don't we first maybe pull a card on, or cards on, is there any other reason that sugar infiltrated everything so much other than what we've already discussed? Like, is there anything deeper that we're missing?
Whoa. Okay. The cards are jumpy today. They want to like talk. So let's see what they say.
And if you have any questions, for those of you watching live, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you're watching the replay, feel free to leave your comments. We want to hear from you. And if you have any other topic ideas popping up from this, leave them in the chat or the comments.
Yeah, so it was really a control structure is what's coming up. This is the Eight of Swords, and it says interference. And what it means is, like, it was meant to interfere with your mind. Definitely. Like, once they figured out the proportions of it, it took them a while to figure it out. Once they figured out the proportions of it, they, like I said, they honed it in, and they figured out I can't even remember. There's a name for the point that they got to. I can't remember if it was like the sweet point
The
or
sweet spot.
something like that. They literally coined a phrase for this, and it was mental interference. So swords always mean the mind. And it was meant to sort of throw you off your track. And when I feel into it, or ask the team, what do you mean by your track? And it was like spiritual distraction was one of the purposes of sugar.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, right? Because if your pineal gland's calcified, this is one of your major antenna points, if you will, about how you're connecting to the knowledge that you have that is around you. It's in your energetic field.
Yeah.
And it's helping with your own intuition. So it's blocking that, and it's distracting you from what's going on, so that it was more easy to sort of do things right in front of your face, and you're not catching it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is when you're fighting with your body, when you're pissed off at yourself because you gave into sugar again and your cravings are through the roof and your brain fogged, you don't have the capacity to have the level of discernment and awareness and being in tune and power. Like, you're just distracted, right?
Absolutely. And one thing I'll also share is that right before we did this, I had asked, are we still being controlled with sugar? And it said, no, it's actually coming to an end, which is it's a good thing. And I think whenever we are seeing how a structure operates, or how it was intended to operate, that's a signal always to me that it's already coming to an end. Because if we were, whatever structures we're in the middle of that we can't see, those are the ones that are still operational.
Yeah.
This one it's kind of coming to an end. People are wising up. They're choosing differently. They recognize that they have options, and we have an awareness of it. And this is the tricky part. I knew about how crappy sugar was when I was engaging with large amounts of sugar.
Yeah.
And so I think that was probably more torturous than being unaware, was knowing this is bad. This is not good for me. I can tell I'm in pain. I can tell I'm suffering. And yet I am pulled to it. I'm pulled to it, just like just like every addiction, right?
Yeah. And then that triggers the guilt and the shame. And those are such heavy, dense, low vibration emotions. And then that just fuels this behavior and this looping cycle even more.
And on a spiritual level, that makes you open to a type of entity attachment.
Yeah.
And when I say entity attachment, I'm not talking something that's got like a face and hands or anything. It's really a low frequency thought form which is an entity attachment. And this feeds off of our own negative emotions, and it helps to, it's like a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Once this thing can attach, you kind of stay in it until you can clear that out of your system.
Yeah. And to bring a second point to that, thank you for sharing that. That's huge. And when we stay in those low vibrations and potentially also with this negative entity, we are far more likely to engage in other negative self-sabotaging behaviors, people pleasing, right? Perfection,
Mm-hmm.
all or nothing. Now I want to drink more because sugar and alcohol only have one molecule difference. So if you've quit alcohol, but now you're deep into sugar, there's deeper healing to do, right? So we will notice ourselves go into other self-sabotaging behaviors emotionally, or right, like when we are in this lower state and we stay there. So this is one of the reasons why healing your relationship with food is so potent, and healing the sugar addiction, because you will probably notice stepping into your power in other areas that you were in a, right, like more of a sabotaging place with as well.
Oh yeah. Did you want to ask another question, like around the healing aspect of sugar? I feel like that's one we could ask.
Yeah,
Or
if you have
healing
one
around
coming up,
sugar.
yeah, please ask.
Let me just see if I can phrase this better. Is there anything else that we can do to help? I feel like it's to help heal maybe the mind when it comes to
Yes,
sugar. Let's see
totally.
what they can say. So
Totally. And while you're shuffling a couple interesting points, it's not actually the salt that fuels the high blood pressure, it's the sugar, because the sugar fuels so much inflammation that thickens the blood, and that's what causes the heart to need to pump harder. So a lot of people's high blood pressure issues are tied to sugar and high cortisol. And same with sugar feeds a lot of like cancers and autoimmune. So right, it's not just you with bad genes. There is a deep layer of looking at the quality of food that you're consuming when it comes to healing and dealing with autoimmune.
what comes up? This is, I feel like my team's joking with me, because this one is like, come on, there's one way you can do this, really. So this is the Prince of Discs, also known as the Page of Discs, coming up in the reverse position. And what it's talking about is like, you've got to stop ignoring good advice. It's kind of like, guys, there's no real like spiritual, it's not a heavy spiritual component. It's literally more of an action.
Yeah.
So discs are pentacles, which mean earth element or the physical body. It's like the practical advice is the way to heal the mind. The mind will heal itself according to this.
Yeah.
Just by following some good advice. So some good advice would be, I'm going to hand it to Amber. What are a couple steps people could do now if they're listening to this and they're just now considering healing that relationship with sugar? What would you advise?
Number one, make sure you're well hydrated and drinking 2 liters of water a day. Add lemon, infuse your water with fresh fruits, right? It helps take the edge off a little bit as you're dealing with cravings. If you have really intensive sugar cravings, try adding more fats and proteins into your meals, as that regulates blood sugar more and reduces cravings. So things like avocados, nuts and seeds, olive oil, fatty fish, eggs for your fats, and your proteins, right? Animal protein is so good for helping with sugar cravings. If you don't eat animal protein, making sure you're getting ample amounts of beans and lentils and quinoas and things like that. And my third thing is, be willing to deal with this dopamine emotional component of it, whether you go at it at your own or you maybe look at getting support, because when you're dealing with these dopamine highs and the brain patterning and the ego negative mindset trying to encourage you to just keep doing it all at the same time, it can feel really intensive. There may be certain supplements, hormone imbalances, gut issues, and emotional stuff to deal with, because if we look at the emotional connection to sugar, it's where is sweetness missing in life, or where am I lacking joy in life? So you can start journaling on that, but you may want to consider, if you feel like you're trying to take a go at it and it's just not resolving, maybe get a little bit of help. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you around beating sugar addiction if you desire to. But hydration, protein, and fat. Add more cinnamon to your food. That's my last one, because it's high in chromium, and chromium is great for blood sugar.
Oh, I love cinnamon. Cinnamon's
So
great.
good. Yes.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, if I could go back in time and talk to 11 p.m. Therese back those days, one of the things I tell her to do is I tell her to get off of the couch and go into bed, because I know also that every time I had that thought, I was sitting on the couch in front of the TV when I was craving those unhealthy snacks. And just being away from the place that normally occurs, that thought can help reduce it. It might not get rid of it, but it would take down some of the intensity of that emotion. Also, just being in bed before 11 p.m. is, something I would have encouraged her to do too, because that's something I still work on
Yeah.
now. And
Yeah.
and sleep is magic. I mean, sleep is so much healing magic in it. It's not funny.
Yes. It will reduce your cravings and it helps prevent your dopamine levels from dropping really low. So you feel the need to reach for a quick fix dopamine high like sugar. People don't realize that. We need to have a whole chat around sleep and how
Oh
our
my
sleep has
gosh,
been
yes.
interfered with, because when you don't sleep good, your dopamine's lower, it impacts your mood, and it's easier to go for the foods. And you're also in that effort mentality, and that makes it easier to go for the sugar too, right? So,
Oh my gosh, totally. All right. Did you want to ask one more question before we wrap up?
yes. So I want to ask, how will we see, I guess, what will replace sugar? Because we know, but how is it going to shift in the store where like 65 or 70% of the aisles are full of products like laden with sugar? Like, what is that shift going to look like? Because that's going to trigger a lot of people who have sugar addiction that don't even realize it, are then missing their favorite foods.
Okay, so I'm asking, what is the shift to healthy food going to look like for humanity coming out?
Yeah, love that.
Come on, guys, come on.
I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it too. It's an interesting thought because it's going to be slow, is what I feel they're going to say. Okay, here we go. Come on. Okay. Yep, it's good. Okay, interesting. This is the Knight of Swords. So it's going to be an abrupt change for a lot of people. It's going to be like unpleasant feeling for some when that all comes out. Because again, what we're talking about is addiction. It's not something that comes until we have different healing modalities available to us, and let's hope that comes with this.
Yeah.
People are going to have to go through the stages of detox and withdrawal that the body does, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that come up. Some people are going to deem it as unfair. It's not. What I get is, it's kind of like how people reacted to the soda tax that happened in New York back in the 2010s or something like that is when it happened. People had a horrible reaction to it, didn't like it. Now I was on the other side where I'd just gotten off of that crap, and I was like, yeah, that's a good incentive to keep me to not buy it, because I don't want to spend more money on something that's not good for me. But there was a big backlash that came with that. So that's the first thing I get, is that there's just a sense of they have to approach it very slowly, and it's going to be something that's more conversations about how to do it versus telling you have to do it. So what we're not going to see is a big yank of things off the shelves and things disappearing, because again, they're letting us know that would actually go against free will, which is not something benevolent energy does. It will not tell you how to behave. It will show you, it will encourage you, it will mentor you and guide you, and there will be more of a push and more of a celebration, or like they would advertise more towards the healthy and really encouraging and maybe showing us statistics. Now, this again, you're dealing with some people who never want to look at this. Yeah. And the reaction will be sort of negative. So it's a thing where we're going to get weaned off of it slowly. And really, it's going to be up to you, the individual, to really take control of this. But they're going to give you more tools to do so. So more products will possibly be introduced that have the minimal amount of negative byproducts in them, like seed oils or high fructose corn syrup and things like that. And what you're going to find is, you remember when the health food really started kicking in, and the health food really started taking off, I would say, around 2007 was when you really started seeing it. I mean, Whole Foods wasn't as wide a brand at the time. but you start seeing gluten-free things in the stores. But what you
Yeah.
see is like all the regular stuff in this little section of gluten-free. Well, it's
Yeah.
going to go in the other direction. It's going to be like this wider selection of like gluten-free type items in this little increment
Yeah.
of the unhealthy stuff that you're used to, probably already being modified as it's being put out there. So slowly removing high fructose corn syrup with maybe regular sugars or raw sugars put back into it. So slowly, again, decreasing it. And again, there's going to be people who that's still going to affect. They're going to feel the shift from getting this really sweet, really fast, intense sugar punch into this more stabilized blood sugar thing. And it's going to bring up the stuff that people are going to need to work on.
Yeah.
Right. So, which is good. I mean, I think that's
thing.
ultimately a good thing. But yeah, it's the thing that's difficult about this is we're so hooked into it and it's so easily available.
Yes.
And
it's cheap.
It's
right?
cheap. That's right. I mean, that's one of the ways that they get us and get us to imply our consent to it is they make, buying these foods. I mean, I watch people do like shopping runs at like Walmart or something, and they're getting groceries for like a third of what I pay going to like Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. It's really tempting to do that. And when you're thinking, I need to make my money go as far as I can, the health naturally gets kind of put on the back burner. And so people don't want to hear about it. They just want to be able to function and live their lives. This is going to confront that a little bit, because as you slowly take away the supply or change it or modify it so that it's actually healthier, you're still dealing with the withdrawal symptoms. Now, you and I, and I'm sure people watching, we're choosing to do it consciously. Like we're willing to go in and be like, I want to change, right?
Yeah.
And that makes it so much easier. Imagine it changing on you and you're not conscious of what's changing or why, but you suddenly feel a lot worse. That's going to be it's going to be a hard time for the majority of people who aren't ready to face the food part yet.
Yeah. Yeah. But I feel like as people learn the truth and you follow the money and you really learn that it's the same 10 companies that are literally creating all these little companies that claim to be healthier and what their real intentions were, that may also turn some people off more easily as well and help break some of the sugar addictions, because you're like, wow, like, okay, I've been addicted to this food. I've loved this food. There's maybe a bit of grief through that, but wow, I don't want to give my money to this company that is literally purposefully wanted to hurt me, poison me, slowly kill me, make me get sick. So I need to rely on big pharma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Like,
yeah. I was just asking, what you're saying there. Like, absolutely. The first thing that happens is this decrease in pleasure. Oof, is a rough one. And that's the dopamine levels now trying to return to normal.
Yeah.
But right behind it is freedom. It's like we get to be set free. You're set free. It was a fake pleasure anyway. It wasn't real pleasure. It wasn't coming from a sustainable place. Real pleasure is something you create inside of you. This was something that was externally added into you. Yes. Right. And so it wasn't the real pleasure that your brain was telling you it was.
Exactly. No, I'm glad that those popped out. So freedom, this is what we get. This is what's on the other side of this. And there's so much learning and healing that is available through working through this. Try to have an open mind and be willing to work through it and come to the other side, because it is freeing.
Absolutely.
I love this conversation. So much good knowledge today. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I mean, if you want to hear more from me or you want to do a reading with me, you can go to blythestarlight.com, and in the description below this video will have the link for you to do that. For those watching live, you're going to have to look up blythestarlight.com. It's all one word. But Amber, of course, is the expert here when it comes to working with overcoming the emotional eating and the sugar specifically. So how can they work with you?
And I just realized that I forgot to @Blythe Starlight you in the link. So I'm going to make sure that you're in the title. You're there. Sorry about that, Therese.
That's okay.
And yes, like, thank you for sharing the cards with this. There's so much here, and I'm excited for people to energetically work on this with you as well. And so if you're struggling with emotional eating, binge eating, food addiction, you are in this heavy attachment with sugar and you're wanting to heal it. I work with women on this every day. I healed it myself. I was to the point where I was eating out of a garbage can, and now I'm just so detached from it. So just, if I can do it, you can do it. We're here to heal. So if you want to reach out, you can go to amberapproved.ca and book a 30-minute body freedom consultation. The details are also below in the description for you to come through and connect in that way as well. But healing is available. You don't have to stay stuck in this. So here we are again, wrapping up the 3rd episode of Shining the Light On. We hope you all are enjoying it. Again, leave your comments, your questions, your feedback in the live chat if you're with us live, or if you're going in to watch the replay, please leave a comment, subscribe, like, share this with someone you think could benefit from it. And we'll see what we come up with next week. It's a surprise, isn't it?
It's always good, though. It's always good.
Yes. Take care.
Bye.